This heckler seems like a show to me with this administration. I mean, the protester was saying there is nothing to celebrate because these laws won't do anything. But he's right. It wouldn't have stopped the deranged July 4th shooter. It's the laws on our books that are not being enforced, and that could have prevented this type of strategy. So we've got Rick Green. He's the founder of Patriot Academy and America's Constitution coach to join us and have this discussion with us. Rick, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Good to be with you.
So I got to tell you, Biden repeated today that the Second Amendment, it's not absolute. Here he is trying to make this point. Take a listen.
The right to bear arms is not an absolute right that dominates all others. The perennial price for living in a community with others is being neighbors, of being fellow citizens, is that we obey the laws and customs that ensure that what the framers call domestic tranquility.
I don't know about you, but to me, domestic tranquility is making sure you're able to protect oneself and your community. I mean, why is it that Biden just misinterprets the Second Amendment?
Well, like most all of his speeches, I have no idea what the man said, but I've heard enough of what the left says about these things that I know politicians love platitudes. They love to say, why can't we just keep the guns out of the bad guys' hands? And that sounds great, but when you get down to the facts and the actual history and the laws of nature, they ignore that. They don't want to talk about that because they want to live in this fantasy land where guys like Joe Biden create death traps known as gun-free zones. They create laws that make it harder for us. They want to make us helpless, and somehow they think that's going to make the bad guy harmless. They ignore all of those things. I mean, New York had everything that now Illinois wants to pass into law, and it did not stop the Buffalo shooter. In fact, it encouraged the Buffalo shooter to go where he did because he knew they had all these laws against what they call high-capacity magazines. We call them regular capacity magazines. But at any rate, these laws do not work. They don't save lives. They end up costing lives. But politicians don't want to talk about the facts. They don't want to talk about the nature of man. That's the real problem here. We need more sheepdogs everywhere in our communities to be able to stop the crazies when they show up. You're not going to stop mass murder attempts. A dedicated killer is going to try to kill. You have to be able to stop them in the moment. You're not going to prevent them from being able to get a firearm somewhere, somehow.
So, Rick, Illinois Democrats, they seem interested in certain weapons bans, saying that everything is on the table if the state were to ban ARs, for example. Do you think that would hold up in court anymore?
I don't, based on the Bruin decision. This is the most popular rifle in the nation. And just as an example, my friend Stephen Williford took an AR-15, ran barefoot into the fight to save 27 lives at Sutherland Springs when the crazy guy showed up in full body, Type 3 body armor, SWAT helmet, the whole 9 yards. And Stephen Williford, the good guy, used an AR-15 to save the day. So these people, I listen to these politicians and these legislatures, and I have to admit I was one. I'm a recovering politician, used to be a state rep in Texas. But I listen to them, and they talk about these assault rifles, and they talk about how they want to ban these high-capacity magazines. And most of the time, they have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know what the weapon is they're speaking of. They have no idea how many lives are saved every year because of good guys and gals with guns, specifically like they want to ban. So it's unfortunate, but he's truly ignorant. And I don't mean that as an insult. They just don't know what they're talking about. But you know how politicians are. They want to do something that makes them feel good.
Right, without solving the core of the problem, that of being a lot of mental health issues that we're seeing. But the Democrats, I'm not sure if they like the Constitution, but they do like to apply it to themselves in their own interpretation. So we saw this professor of Howard University School of Law. He penned an op-ed for NBC News saying Democrats need to rely on the 13th Amendment as Congress can enact reasonable laws that protect these rights today. Just as slavery branded all blacks with slavery's badges and incidents, that sounds a little too much for me. You have about 30 seconds here. What are they trying to get at?
Well, they're trying to use this 68 decision that used that phrase to create all these different kinds of protections that aren't actually in the Constitution. There is not a single person that was alive on the planet at the time the 13th and 14th Amendments were put into the Constitution that believed any of this nonsense that they're talking about there. It's just like Joe Biden saying you couldn't have a cannon in the founding era. That's an absolute lie. You could have a cannon. And the only ordinances we can find against it said don't fire it at night in town. You're waking people up. These people do not care about original intent. They don't care about the Constitution. That's why they have to be defeated at the polls.
All right, Rick Green, got to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us tonight.